and welcome back to another tutorial video for the Lonely Mountain Snow Riders level editor. The topic of this video is water bodies, that is, lakes and rivers. If we go to the third tool of the tools window, we will see this water drop icon. That's our water tools. First off, we have the lakes. In order to make a lake, we'll first have to make a basin for that lake. For that, we are going to use the terrain sculpting tools. We could go to our flatten terrain tool, select this height, and then use shift and scrolling the wheel to make it a bit lower. That should do. And then we're going to paint around here to make our lake basin. Well, now our rocks are floating, so I'm going to sink them all the way to the bottom of what is going to be our lake with our decoration edit tool. Now that we have a lake basin, we can go to add lake and click on the edges of said basin to select the height of our lake. The lake will autofill to be contained within our basin. You can readjust the height of the lake just by clicking anywhere on the lake and then dragging your mouse up or down. If we bring it down, our lake will sink a bit. If we bring it higher than our basin's edge, then it will overflow and cover the entire trail. We can still take it back as long as our origin point, that is this blue dot, is within our basin limits. We can take our lake down again and it will autofill so it doesn't go beyond the limits of the basin. We could also modify the lake's height by using the slider on the left and then clicking refill the lake. However, if your lake goes below the terrain, nothing will be filled with water. Let's bring it back. We also have two brush edit modes. The first one is the Opacity Brush. With it, we could modify the opacity of our lake, making it a bit more transparent. For example, if we choose a 0.8 opacity value, or we could also straight up just make it transparent by using a 0 opacity value. If we go in game, however, even this transparent water will act as water, which means that we will drown in it, like this. We can paint it back up to 1. The other brush is the flow brush. Right now, our lake doesn't have any specific flow direction. We can increase the force of the brush to 5, so we can see more visually how it's changing, and then we paint into any direction. The flow of the lake will go towards that direction. As you can see, it only affects the specific points of the lake that you painted with it. For the purpose of our lake not looking so weird, we can take it back to 0 and paint all over it again. Finally, if you go to the water state, you can actually freeze up your lake and you convert it into ice. If the lake is frozen, you can actually ride on top of it, as you can see now. As with icy ground, frozen lakes are a slippery surface where it's very hard to control your player. Of course, we can revert that to be flowing water again. Next up, let's take a look into the rivers. The tool next to the lakes is the rivers, and they work in a very similar fashion to the paths. As such, if we click the Add River button, a new river spline will spawn in the middle of our screen. Just as with paths, we can move the whole river, edit its individual points, edit the width of their points, and edit their curves by moving this handle around. Rivers will bite into your terrain, creating a riverbed where the terrain will not be influenced by terrain sculpting. That is, as long as you don't bake it into the terrain. We can also elongate rivers in a similar way in which we elongate paths, by either clicking the buttons to the left or by clicking into the terrain while holding control. Rivers have some particular features. For example, we can decrease the force of the stream. By moving this slider here, we could make a very strong river, just like that. Or we could make a river with no flow. In most scenarios, just having a force of 1 will look the most natural. Another thing about rivers is that if they go vertically, they will automatically create a waterfall. I'll show you an example by using this mountain wall. If I adjust my river to go into the wall and then create a new point on top of it, if we adjust the distance between the point on top of the waterfall and on the bottom of it, we will see how our waterfall is being shaped. Just like that. Of course, rivers, just as lakes, can also be frozen. We can change the state here. And just as with lakes, if you ride on top of a frozen river, you will be riding on ice. If you go into a flowing river, well, you will just drown. We can also select a point in our river, let's say this one, and split the river. This will make it so we have two different river splines, and we can take this one away from that one. We can also multi-select different rivers if we go to our river list and we hold Ctrl and click on both of them. If we have multiple rivers selected, we can join them. Now they technically form part of the same river, which means we can connect them in some other point by selecting a point and then holding Ctrl and clicking on a point from the separated river part, and with such we can have branching rivers. Instead of splitting the whole river, we can alternatively just split the junction so we don't have two rivers in our list. In this case, the river is still one element, but the different parts are disconnected. We could now take this head away from the other two and connect the previous point to the other two parts. And now our river is branching a lot more. Since they are so close, our rivers are starting to get artifacts. So you can twig them around a bit and move them apart so you remove those artifacts. Of course, you can still delete a river point just by selecting it and pressing delete. I have to readjust my origin point a bit after doing that. If you're happy with how your river is looking, you can bake the riverbed. Just as with splines, your river will no longer influence the path beneath and you will be able to use the sculpting tools to modify it. However, your water bodies will stay. We can use this to now smooth the surroundings of the river so the terrain flows more naturally into it. Now we maybe want to adjust our river splines a bit so they look a bit better. As you can see, you can keep on modifying your rivers after baking. It just won't affect the terrain underneath, and you may have to sculpt around it to make a riverbed. Finally, I noticed that our lake has some empty spots that came up after we modified the rivers so they flow into our lake. I'll make them a bit bigger so you can notice them better. If we go back into our lake and select it, we can just click on top of it and the lake will be refilled. I hope you find creative uses for the water bodies, whether it being in their flowing water state or frozen state. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.